Today, I'm going to continue my discussion of the goals for the Indian economy, my goals for the Indian economy by 2047. In a previous video labeled as Opinion 27, I had listed three goals. Today, I will discuss the first goal. The first goal is economic and it's domestic and it has three parts. So let's discuss the first part of the first goal. The first part is to create millions of jobs for young people who are coming of working age, which we can say is 16 and above. Who are these people? They are probably coming from the rural areas, leaving the villages, which has been happening in India for decades. They are likely to not have high levels of skill, probably just high school, even less, perhaps some college which they didn't teach much or where they did not learn much. So they are not highly skilled people. They are not good quality engineers or something like that. They are basically low level skilled people. But these are the people who need jobs. And these are the people for whom we have to provide jobs. Right now, many of them can be seen as struggling in large cities, living in difficult, crowded conditions. We saw them running back to their villages or small hometowns when the pandemic came about in India and the government declared a lockdown in early 2020. In May 2020, they all streamed back home. Those are not the kinds of jobs that we can provide to millions of people where they have to live in such difficult and terrible conditions. We need better jobs. And what does better mean? It means reasonably paying. Now, what is reasonably paying? It is a subjective assessment. They have to make enough money for them to lead a fairly comfortable life. Now, fairly comfortable is obviously a subjective term, depends on who you are, what your needs are. And it also depends on things like what's your family size, are you married, do you have kids? All of those things can be very important in determining what is reasonably paying. Now, we don't really have such a definition of reasonably paying or an estimate which would take account of the differences across India, differences across needs, costs, and so on. And it's something that think tanks should be working on to define what is a reasonably paying job. Because for people to get jobs that don't pay enough, like the workers in Dhobi Ghat in Mumbai, who are making 6,000 rupees a month and leading a miserable life, and yet sending some money home, that's not what we want by 2047. We need some more data on this. Um, it cannot be 6,000 rupees in terms of today's prices. It has to be more than that. But how much more? That is something that we need to figure out. Now, that has to be done by think tanks, independent think tanks who have the skills. And indeed, they do have the skills. It's just that they haven't yet done the job. The second part of the first goal is to have a high growth rate of GDP. Now, lots of people are critical of GDP, don't like it. I know very well the weaknesses of GDP. In my core economics book, there's a discussion of the weaknesses and the flaws. Yet, it is a very useful indicator when we use it as it is defined, a measure of the economic activity in the economy as a whole. Nothing more, not as a measure of well being, nothing else, just that. We need to have more economic activity in the economy. And the only well established way we have of measuring that is GDP. Now, we need a high growth rate of GDP. Currently, our growth rate is between 5 to 7%. Even 7% is something that we are not really aiming for or achieving. At 6.5% growth rate, we say we are the highest, fastest growing economy in the world, and it's true. But the fastest growing economy in the world doesn't give any benefits to the people by itself. Just because others are growing slower doesn't mean there are enough benefits to the people in our country. It's well established by many studies that countries with high growth rate of GDP have been more successful in reducing poverty than countries with a low growth rate of GDP. Now, obviously, we can find exceptions to this, and there's no theoretical reason why this has to be the case, but this is what the data show for the last 30 to 50 years. The high growth rates lead to more reduction in poverty than low growth rates on average. That's what we see. We really need to aim at 10%, not at 6.5 and 7%. That's not going to do it. Okay, the third part of the goal is to protect the environment. Now, one of the flaws of the GDP is that it does not take account of the damage to the environment. Indeed, it doesn't. So we have to have a separate sub goal, that is to protect the environment. The difficulty here is that there is no indicator or measure of how much environmental damage we have done in a year at the national level or at the state level. There's just no aggregate index available. Look, last year's damage was more than the previous years. We don't know. We don't have such a measure. People should be working on such a measure, but it's tough. It's not going to be easy to get such a measure. So we'll have to look at it case by case. And we have to recognize that in a democracy, the political leaders, independent of which party we are talking about, are focused on the short term, winning the next election. It's very important because if you don't win the next election, you're out of power. So all politicians want to win the next election. And in winning the next election, protecting the environment, which is a long term goal, often gets lost. And yet we see how, once we have polluted our sacred river Ganga, how hard it is to clean it up. It's not a joke. It's taken a lot of money, a lot of effort, and a lot of expertise, and we don't have it yet. We have lost so much forest cover. Our air has become polluted in large cities. This is not the legacy we want to leave to our children and grandchildren. So we have to protect the environment, keeping in mind that this is not a high priority of politicians who have to fight elections. So non-profit groups have to step up and sensitize the people that they should put pressure on the politicians that this is not the way for our country to become well-to-do by 2047. We need non-profit people to step up. Now, what's missing from this economic goal is inequality. A lot of people are concerned that inequality, income inequality, and wealth inequality are increasing in India. And indeed, they are, as measured by our conventional indicators. And I'm quite familiar with the whole issue of inequality. In my core economics book, which has only 9 chapters, there's a whole chapter on inequality, which is not so common in most economics textbooks or books of that type. But my focus is not so much on the inequality of outcomes, meaning current wealth, current income inequality. My focus is on equality of opportunity. What is the prospect for young people? Are they going to be denied the opportunity to become well off? Are they going to be denied because of traditional identities or because they lack family connections? Are those things going to come in the way of people who have the skills and merit and talent rising up? This is a very serious issue. What's happening to the equality of opportunity in our country? Again, there is no indicator to measure this. And I put it as the fourth simply because there is no way to even monitor it, what's happening to the equality of opportunity. But this is a time for academics and think tanks to come up with workable definitions of equality of opportunity in our country, state by state, and to be able to measure it so that we know, are we denying our children the right to do better in the future? We shouldn't be doing that. So that's the end of this discussion. That's the end of my discussion of the first goal. I'll be back with a discussion of the second goal next time. Bye till then. Bye.